Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible, not because you were weak, but because you were always there, always available, always agreeable? You held the door, you spoke gently, you answered quickly, you gave without measure, and in return, you became forgettable, not because your worth was lacking, but because you made it too easy to touch, too easy to predict. In a world that measures value through scarcity, what is always accessible begins to feel expendable. Machiavelli saw this with brutal clarity. He did not worship fear, he understood presence. He knew that silence, when chosen with discipline, is not absence, it is control. That restraint, when grounded in clarity, is not distance, it is power. You were not meant to explain yourself to be understood. You were meant to embody something that cannot be reduced by words. And the moment you stop handing your power away, the world leans in. This is not about speaking louder. It is about learning when not to speak at all. Stay with me. What you're about to hear may sound quiet, but it will change everything. The hidden pain. There is a kind of pain that doesn't cry out. It doesn't bruise the body or leave visible wounds, but it lingers. It follows you into quiet rooms and silent nights, wearing you down like water wears down stone. It is the pain of being present but unseen. The pain of loyalty unrewarded, of patience mistaken for passivity, of giving fully to those who never once looked back to see if you had anything left. You feel it when your ideas are brushed aside, when your absence is never noticed, when your kindness is assumed and your silence is used against you. And it cuts not because someone yelled at you, but because no one did, because you were calm, because you were respectful, because you never fought back. And in that stillness, they forgot you were bleeding. We're taught that kindness is noble, that patience is maturity, that silence is wisdom. But no one warns you that kindness without discernment becomes a signal for exploitation. That silence without assertion becomes your own prison. That patience without boundaries becomes the soil where disrespect quietly grows. Even history confirms this truth. Socrates was condemned by those he tried to awaken. Jesus was betrayed by those he forgave. Joan of Arc was satisfied by the very kingdom she served. Time has changed, but people haven't. Today, the employee who never says no is the one left with the weight of the world. The friend who always listens is the one no one checks on. The partner who forgives everything is the one most likely to be forgotten. Why? Because we do not value what we believe we will never lose. We do not protect what we think we already own. And we do not respect what has never asked us to. The real tragedy is not just that good people are hurt, it's that they are hurt quietly, gradually, without outrage or recognition, and then they are blamed for their own erosion. You look back and think, maybe I should have spoken up. Maybe I should have demanded more. Maybe I should have left sooner. But the truth is, you were not weak. You were simply following a rule book that was never written to protect you. You believed that being consistent was the same as being valuable, that loving hard meant staying long, that being agreeable meant being respected. But life shows us otherwise. What you allow teaches others how to treat you, and what is always available loses its weight. Respect doesn't vanish in a dramatic moment. It dissolves in the little things, the unanswered message, the offhand insult, the missing apology, the way they stop asking how you're doing because they assume you'll always be fine. And you stay, you smile, you excuse it. You say it's all right because deep down you thought low maintenance made you lovable, that being strong meant being silent. But the world doesn't honor the always available. It fears what it cannot easily reach. It admires what it doesn't fully understand. And it respects those who are willing to walk away. This is the quiet suffering of the kind. You're not hated, you're forgotten, you're not attacked, you're ignored, and that hurts in a way betrayal never could. So ask yourself this: were you truly invisible? Or had you just made yourself too easy to see? Because sometimes the ones we forget first are the ones who were always right in front of us, asking for nothing. Why predictability fails you. You thought they overlooked you because of who you are, because of some flaw in your character, but it was never personal. It was never about your goodness or your intentions. It was about your pattern, about what you repeated without question. Because if you want to understand why the generous are often dismissed, why the loyal are forgotten, why the kind are taken for granted, you must stop blaming the goodness in your heart and start examining the structure of your behavior. The world, as nature designed it, does not respond to fairness. It responds to contrast. It responds to scarcity. And that truth, however bitter, demands your awareness. The human mind is built to survive, not to honor virtue. What it encounters too often becomes invisible. What is always there begins to lose shape. That is why your patience was seen as passivity, your forgiveness as weakness, your constant presence as insignificance. You became familiar, and in a world that fears loss more than it cherishes presence, familiarity becomes disposable. Your virtue turned into wallpaper. You were seen, but never noticed. But here lies a deeper law of human interaction. People do not respond only to affection. They respond to tension, to the possibility of loss, to the quiet fear of being denied access. That is why the quiet leader draws more attention than the one who explains everything. That is why the friend who does not always speak commands more space in the room than the one who always does. And that is why your availability, your transparency, your willingness to give before being asked has reduced the weight of your presence, not because you lack value, but because you gave that value away without asking anything in return. It is not manipulation. It is understanding the nature of attention. The Stoics knew this. They observed the behavior of others not to exploit, but to govern their own conduct wisely. Machiavelli, standing at the edge of power and ruin, did not preach silence as fear. He practiced it as strategy. Because the less you reveal, the more control you hold, the less you respond, the more others must consider their words, the less you give without question, the more your presence carries weight. Even the mind functions this way. It filters out what is constant, what makes no demand on its awareness. A whisper is heard when the room is silent, but a loud voice repeated too long becomes background noise. And this is what happens to your presence when you never withdraw it. You trained others to believe your time was endless, your forgiveness automatic, your energy costless, and so they never had to measure the price of their actions. Ask yourself this: who do you truly respect? The one who always speaks, or the one whose words are rare but unforgettable? The one who is always present, or the one whose absence creates gravity? You already know the answer. Power is not in constant movement, it is in precision. The lion is feared not for its noise, but for the unknown moment it will act. The philosopher is not respected for over-explaining, but for knowing when silence says more than speech ever could. So here is your shift. Stop thinking power comes from more expression. It comes from less availability. Make your time something people must rise to deserve. Let your quiet be so intentional that it teaches others to handle your presence with care. And remember this: the world will not respect what you keep offering for free, but it will start to listen the moment you make them wonder what they lost when you walked away. What you tolerate, you teach. You were not just hurt, you were conditioned, taught to remain calm when chaos brewed inside you, taught to smooth tension even when truth demanded disruption, taught to be agreeable even when your soul screamed for boundaries. But no one warned you that pain does not always strike like thunder. Sometimes it creeps in through repetition, the same internal compromise, played over and over in the name of virtue. And if you look closely, it was never your kindness that failed you. It was the absence of strategy within that kindness. The first mistake begins when you explain what should be self-evident. Someone crosses a line, and instead of standing firm, you retreat into justification. You say, "I didn't mean it that way. I was only trying to help." But every time you defend your boundary as if it were negotiable, you diminish its weight. True strength speaks with clarity and then lets silence carry the rest. A line that requires explanation is no longer a line. It becomes an invitation to be crossed, and power, once explained too many times, becomes diluted and forgettable. The second mistake is forgiving without requiring change. Forgiveness is not weakness, but when offered without distance, it becomes consent to the cycle. If there is no cost to losing your trust, then your forgiveness becomes hollow. Some people do not need to be welcomed back. They need to feel your absence like winter after a long summer. Because absence, not tolerance, reshapes behavior. If there is no discomfort in losing you, there was never any depth in having you. Third, you confuse openness with depth. You were told to be real, so you shared your heart, your wounds, your history. But there is a difference between honesty and exposure. Sharing everything with those who have not earned your trust is not noble. It is unguarded. And the parts of you that were sacred become entertainment for those who were never meant to hold them. Stoic wisdom reminds us that restraint is strength. To wait, to observe, to give slowly and with discernment. That is how connection grows with dignity. Fourth, you let small violations slide. The cutting joke masked as humor, the silence when you needed response, the subtle withdrawal of care, and you stay quiet. You tell yourself it's minor, not worth the confrontation, but every major betrayal begins with the quiet tolerance of something smaller. Respect is not built in big speeches. It is carved out in the daily decisions to not let disrespect become familiar. When you fail to react to the first offense, you teach others they never need to ask for permission. And fifth, the most dangerous mistake of all is mistaking utility for value. You offer your help before it's asked for. You solve problems before they arise. And soon you are no longer seen as strong, but simply as available. You become a fixture, necessary but never sacred. And when your use expires, they disappear, not because you failed, but because they never cherished you. They used you. But these mistakes do not mean you are weak. They mean you were never shown how power truly works. You were taught to be liked, not respected. But now, you must choose. Respect is not earned by being everything to everyone. It is earned by learning to say, "I no longer give that part of me away for free." This is not cruelty. This is clarity. And once you understand this, your silence becomes your fortress, your restraint becomes your language, and your presence becomes priceless. Presence over explanation. There comes a moment when you stop asking, "Why do they treat me this way?" and start asking, "What did I teach them to believe about me?" That is not a moment of despair. It is the beginning of power. It is the turning point where hurt transforms into understanding and confusion becomes command. Not emotional reaction, but strategic awakening. Because the world does not respond to your intentions. It responds to your posture, your presence, your self-enforced boundaries carried with quiet certainty. Respect is not demanded, it is structured. This is where philosophy enters, the architecture of self-mastery. And few understood this better than Niccolo Machiavelli. Most misread him. They believe he glorified tyranny or praised manipulation. But the truth is far more disciplined. Machiavelli did not invent the rules of power. He exposed them. He wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both." Not as a threat, but as a principle. Because love without strength dissolves, but fear, when rooted in earned respect, stabilizes. You do not need to inspire fear through aggression. You inspire it through clarity, through the unshakable ability to walk away without raising your voice, through the self-restraint that carries weight. Every human interaction asks a silent question. What will happen if I cross you? And if the answer is nothing, I will be patient. I will forgive. Then you have already surrendered your authority. People do not respect what they can predict. They respect what they must earn access to. Even the Stoics warned against appearing too mild. True virtue, they taught, is not harmlessness. It is disciplined strength. That is why your ability to remain silent must be stronger than your urge to defend. That is why your absence must teach what your presence no longer can. You do not hold the line by fighting. You hold it by not needing to explain it twice. And here we must refine the idea of darkness. Not to glorify it, but to understand it. The wise do not hide their edge. They know it, they possess it, they command it, but never let it escape without purpose. You must become someone who has the capacity to destroy and chooses restraint. Not because you are passive, but because you're sovereign, the one who knows the blade, but walks with the scabbard closed. This is what makes your silence powerful, not emptiness, but latent fire. Look at nature. The lion does not pace in chaos. It moves in silence. It does not chase every sound. It waits. It calculates. It advances when necessary, and never twice for the same reason. This is what makes others fear it, not its aggression, but the unpredictability of its action. That is what you must embody. Not noise, but presence. Not reaction, but reserve. So from this moment on, you stop giving explanations where there should be decisions. You stop trying to convince those who never deserved access to your inner world. You speak less, and when you do, it is with precision. Every boundary you set is not a wall, it is a mirror. It reflects back your knowledge of self, your unshakable clarity, and your quiet readiness to walk away. And when that becomes your frame, not a reaction, but a way of being, the world will adjust to your silence, the way it once ignored your kindness. The moment you let go, you have reasoned through the logic. You have endured the weight of being misunderstood. You have reflected through the lens of philosophy, but none of it becomes transformation until something within you changes, not with rage, not with resentment, but with resolve. A quiet but final moment when you stop seeing yourself as the agreeable one and begin to embody the sovereign, not because you are bitter, but because you are no longer willing to betray yourself to be seen as good. You stop apologizing before anyone is even offended. You stop softening your words to be tolerated. You stop explaining what should already be known. This is not a surface change. This is the collapse of the former self and the rise of something wiser. It is the death of the one who begged for understanding and the birth of the one who enforces silence as a boundary. You begin asking different questions. Not do they like me, but do I like the version of myself I become in their presence? Not do they deserve more clarity, but do they even deserve continued access? You stop offering second chances, not out of coldness, but because time, once spent, never returns. And your time is now sacred. And sacred things are not handed out. They are approached with reverence. You feel the weight of all the times you said yes, while your soul whispered no. You remember what peace felt like before your attention became a commodity. You start to hear something deep and undeniable rise within you, saying, no more. No more giving without discernment. No more staying in places that shrink your strength. No more justifying your worth to those who refuse to see it. You do not become cruel, you become immovable, because what no one ever taught you is this. The version of you that needed to be liked was the very version that kept attracting disrespect, and that version cannot be reformed. It must be left behind, not gently, not gradually, fully and permanently, in its place. Something cleaner takes root, a self that does not beg to belong, a presence that does not chase comfort, a mind that finds peace not in approval but in absence, absence of noise, absence of confusion, absence of people who mistake your silence for surrender. This is the true pivot, the internal redirection from validation to clarity. You stop negotiating your value. You begin declaring your standard. You do not argue. You disappear. You let silence carry the lesson. Because in a world obsessed with speaking, silence becomes power. And when your attention is no longer free, others begin to treasure what they once discarded. This is not arrogance. It is the highest form of self-respect. The moment this awareness becomes real, your entire posture changes. You do not chase, you release, not from resentment, but from truth. You do not wait for closure. Silence becomes the closure. Walking away without speaking becomes your final word. You are no longer a voice needing to be heard. You are a presence that needs no explanation. Machiavelli called this distance. The Stoics called it control of self. It is not about becoming untouchable through pride. It is about becoming whole through restraint. And now you return, not to the role the world gave you, but to the self you were before you bent to survive. And this version of you walks slowly, speaks rarely, but carries weight. Not because you demand to be feared, but because your peace has become expensive. That is the shift. You do not become hardened, you become precise. You do not raise your voice, you raise your standard. And when that happens, the world adjusts. Quietly, but completely. How to move without speaking. Now that you've changed within, the real test begins. The world will not recognize your shift through noise. It will sense it in your stillness. True power does not announce itself. It speaks through presence. It lives in your posture. It radiates through silence, in conversation. Speak only when necessary. Let your words arrive slowly, like something measured, not given freely. The one who pauses before speaking controls the room. Do not dilute your voice with hesitation. Say, "This is what I see. This is where I stand." And say it only when the moment requires it. When you hold your silence longer than they expect, they lean forward. That is how authority begins. In relationships, give nothing unearned. Presence is not a gift to those who cannot value it. If effort is not mutual, withdraw without a speech. Let absence teach what your words no longer should. Some people only recognize your worth when it leaves without warning. That is not cruelty. That is discipline. In conflict, do not react. Hold your stillness like a sword. Rage is obvious. It makes you legible and therefore controllable. But composure confuses. It unsettles. One calm sentence, unshaken, can silence chaos faster than any shouting match. The one who does not flinch becomes the mirror that reveals the disorder in others. In leadership, speak less, but decide clearly. Let others voice their opinions. Let them show their cards. Then act with precision. You are not here to be agreeable. You are here to set tone. That is influence. And in daily life, make your silence expensive. Share less. Delay your responses. Guard your peace like something rare. Because the moment others stop assuming they have access to your attention, they begin to treat it as sacred. You do not need to explain this shift. You live it. In a world addicted to performance, restraint becomes power. So let them wonder. Let them adjust. You owe them nothing. Your presence now speaks for you. The new face of strength. So here you are, no longer the one who explains every decision to be understood, no longer bending your form to be accepted, no longer giving so much of yourself that you forget the discipline of keeping something sacred for you alone. You have changed, not through loud rebellion, but through quiet resolve, like iron hardened under flame, like mountains carved not by noise, but by pressure over time. And now, even though the world cannot name it, they sense it. They pause when you enter. They tread lightly around your silence, because you have not said it, but you have become it. You walk with less haste. You speak with fewer words, but every glance, every movement carries intention. You no longer walk into a room hoping to be noticed. You walk in knowing your presence is already felt. You do not explain what is self-evident. You let your boundaries speak before your voice ever needs to. And those who once tested your patience now hesitate, because they know you are no longer available in the way you once were. You stopped offering your peace to anyone who disrupted it. You stopped performing humility to survive discomfort. You no longer shrink so others can feel taller. You understood what most never will. Peace is a form of strength, and presence is not a gift for the ungrateful. You no longer crave to be liked. You have discovered something far greater, the quiet gravity of being respected in absence, of being remembered not for how loudly you existed, but for the tension your silence leaves behind. And here lies the paradox. You never raised your voice. You simply withdrew what was once taken for granted. You became the kind of person who does not need to be loud to be heard, who does not need to be feared to command space. You no longer rush to explain. You allow distance to do what words never could, and those who once took you lightly now think twice, not out of fear, but because your restraint speaks volumes. This is strength, not in dominance, not in perfection, not in needing to be loved, but in the calm certainty of one who belongs to himself, the unreadable, the untouchable, the returned. You are not here to beg for recognition. You are here to embody it, not through noise, but through quiet certainty. You are no longer proving yourself. You are choosing yourself, and that is a strength they will never be able to predict. If they overlook your value, let your silence be the reminder. If they misuse your time, let your absence be the lesson. You don't need to explain. You simply become, and the world begins to notice. If this message spoke to you, subscribe for more. Comment below with just 2 words. No more, and remember, the next chapter begins in silence, not in noise. Stay strong. The next video will go even deeper.